don't know about rock the house, but the purpose of this talk is to reveal a better way to deal with caregiving responsibilities and the generational shift of assets that's going to happen as we all age. There are over 333 million people in the U.S. today that all have one thing in common. We're all getting older. And eventually, we pass on. When we do, assets transfer to our next generation. What many people don't know about, and we're here to talk about, is partnership plans between insurance companies and the state Medicaid office, allowing people to have better control of caregiving for their elders and control of their resources that they can pass along to people and places that they deem worthy. Caregivers come in all forms. People that you may know, a neighbor, a coworker, a friend, may be serving today as an informal caregiver. The COVID pandemic revealed how much we need one another, right? People need help with things like grocery shopping and things of that nature. As we get older, we tend to lose a degree of independence and need one another more and more. And so if nothing else, kindness and empathy for others that we don't necessarily know what they're dealing with outside of work, in their personal lives and relationships with other people. But there are compromises to be made. As we have only a limited amount of time and a limited amount of money to do all of the things that we need to do for ourselves and for others. We'll talk about caregiving responsibilities through the persona of Pat. Pat is a persona representing people like ourselves. Maybe you know someone like Pat. Pat is the type of person that would give the shirt off of Pat's back to someone else if they needed it. But again, there's only so much that we can do for others, no matter what we would be willing to do. And so with that, people like Pat want to do everything and want to do anything they can, but have limitations, right? We all have limitations. Pat may not identify as a caregiver by title or label, but by doing something for another person, you are caring. We are caring for other people. The dictionary defines a caregiver as a person who provides direct care, such as for an elder, a spouse, or a child with special needs. But caregiving comes in many forms. Pat is an adult. Pat is a child. Pat is a coworker. Pat is a volunteer. Pat is a friend. Pat has many roles. But like you and like me, Pat is only one person. And with limited time and with limited resources, there's only so much that one person can do for the love and care for another. There's an estimated 50 million people today who are providing informal caregiving services for someone else with no pay, right? Volunteers who are giving their time out of love for someone else. At work, Pat's doing very well. Opportunities for growth are abundant. A coworker had to take time for family leave, which meant more responsibility for Pat on the job. That was very welcome. Pat loves work, identifies with work, and finds work to be very challenging and fulfilling. The next performance review, Pat was recognized and rewarded with a promotion and felt great about it. But there's compromises, right? Relationships at home are compromised when more effort's going toward work. Pat's parents are getting older and need some help with their own caregiving. A birthday's coming up, and it's a milestone birthday for Pat. Pat's starting to recognize that as we get older, we start to have visible signs of aging, maybe a midlife crisis of sorts, and some reflection about the station in life. By now, Pat thought things would be a little bit easier, maybe things would be farther along. Pat did work hard. Pat has saved early and has saved often with the goal of retiring early, because like many people, Pat has interest in doing things with time other than just working for a paycheck. something that would be more fun. But this birthday is kind of hitting Pat hard. A little bit more time to be reflective, to think about life in general and things that are not yet in place that wanted to be in place by this point in time. Things like marriage. How's the relationship with the spouse? It's good. Could be better, could be worse. It's good. The relationship with the kids. Sometimes there's guilt because the kids are getting older too. We're all getting older, and that time can't be recovered. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so there's time to just sit quietly and reflect about what's important and what do we want to do next with the amount of time that we have remaining. Last Thanksgiving, the family came together and had a meal, shared conversation, broke bread. And what was different this year than previous years is Dad at one point got up, walked around the table, and gave each family member a check. And there was happiness and joy and laughter. At the same time, Pat had a terrible feeling in the gut because that wasn't Dad's character. That wasn't something that had happened before, and that was unusual. And so Pat started to look around a little bit more carefully at some subtle hints, like mail on the counter that hadn't been there in the past, and dishes that stayed in the sink a little bit longer than before. Dad was starting to behave just a little bit differently. And so there was a dilemma. Pat said, maybe I shouldn't say anything. I kind of want to, but maybe it's not called for. I just don't know. So over the coming weeks, that resonated with Pat. It caused her to lose some sleep, and one sleepless night, a decision was made. A decision was made that it would be better to say something than to potentially live with regret for not saying something. So a call was made to Dad, and a decision to go to the doctor with Dad and have some questions for the doctor just to make sure that everything was okay. Fast forward, those concerns were warranted. The doctor ran some tests and said, the good news is here, and there's also some bad news. The good news is there's no evidence of any stroke or anything significant like that. On the other side, there is some evidence that there's a form of dementia, and some more tests would be necessary. But for the time being, Dad can go home and live as normally as possible. So that tug of war occurred for weeks and caused stress and distraction for Pat. Again, causing sleepless nights and worry, trying to battle competing demands of where time and attention would go, and love for Dad finally coming to the conclusion that it would be better to say something than to stay silent. The noise in Pat's mind and started to worry about Mom and started to worry about money, because Mom can care for Dad to some extent, but she's not going to be able to do everything by herself. Right? She's just one person. Pat works full-time and can't go there during the weekdays and can check in sometimes on weekends, but there's limitations. In the community where Mom and Dad live, home health can come in, but there's a cost. So let's call it $1,000 that they might budget in to have some help sometimes from home health aides to give Mom some relief. But as dementia progresses, Pat worries that Dad might need some memory care at some point, and $1,000 is not going to cut it. Memory care might cost something closer to $10,000 per month. Where's that money going to come from? They're not alone. Nearly half of Americans worry about running out of money too quickly, and one of the major stresses for retirees or people who are otherwise financially independent is the uncertainty of health care costs during retirement, in particular when there's a dementia type of situation where someone may not be able to remain in their home and may have to go to a memory care unit. There's an estimate of roughly $300,000 for a married couple at 65 years of age in terms of how much money they may pay for healthcare-related expenses that are not covered by Medicare nor Medicaid. A long-term care event like a dementia memory care type of situation is one of those examples. So Pat's mom and dad just don't have that kind of money. In talking with a neighbor who worked with the insurance commissioner's office, they learned about partnership plans. A partnership plan is a collaboration between insurance companies and the state insurance and the state Medicaid program. As you may know, Medicaid can't cover everyone, and Medicaid's not available for people that have assets. In the days of old, people would just do strategies to eliminate their assets and claim Medicaid. Because of that, the program has become more wise to deliberate impoverishment. And so it's designed to help people who need the help, and often goes to those who know how the system would work to maneuver resources to design more income than assets. And so in talking with the neighbor about the state partnership plan, they learned about insurance. Pat's dad will not be eligible for insurance because of his diagnosis with dementia, but Pat's mom may be, and Pat certainly could be also eligible to do some planning. And so the focus now is on what's best for mom and dad. How can we provide for dad while still allowing mom to have a sensible financial position during her retirement? Most states have a partnership plan. At the time of the research, the 3 states that did not have a partnership plan in place were Alaska, Hawaii, and Mississippi. Well, you can look on your insurance commissioner's website for more information about partnership plans. Talk with an independent insurance agent to guide through the process and design provisions in a policy that would serve the need while also fitting in the budget. And the purpose for doing that is this: when individuals who can provide for themselves through insurance strategies do so, they're rewarded by qualifying for Medicaid in a way that would allow them to protect those assets and pass them down to the next generation. So many people might budget and expense into their retirement plan something perhaps like the amount of a car payment in many cases that would allow for those expenses, when needed, to be paid for by an insurance company and by Medicaid once the insurance pool of money is exhausted. So to be clear, a long-term care plan is accessed when the doctor specifies that an individual needs assistance or supervision with activities of daily living. So for those who may be eligible for a plan of insurance, it's time to look into that solution before it's too late. Insurance policies are underwritten for medical, so someone that has a diagnosis of dementia won't qualify, but someone who's younger and healthier very well may and probably will. So Pat starts to go around the community and looking at facilities. If at some point Dad's dementia progresses to the point where Mom can't keep him at home any longer, where would he go? And one of the first things that Pat notices when she walks into a facility is how many women are in the assisted living and nursing facilities. And so she asked an innocent question: why are there so many women here, and where are all the men? And they said, these women are either single or divorced or widowed, or they don't have, the men have maybe passed away. And someone else said, well, they cared for the men, and then the men died, and then say, who's left to care for them after the men drained the resources and left the women with little to nothing to provide for themselves? That's unacceptable. And that's why we're talking about partnership plans today. With careful planning ahead of time, as many people are saving for retirement, a simple conversation and investigation into how a partnership plan may help people to solve that problem while caring for family members, loved ones, and elders can also be a resource to allow for financial literacy and a terrific gift to the next generation. We have a baby boomer population that's over the next 20 years going to pass on an unprecedented amount of wealth to the next generation. For those who have no children, charitable organizations, churches, and other 501c3 nonprofits are excellent destinations for people to choose deliberately where they want their money to go, rather than to watch it just go down the drain by neglecting or not knowing what's available. John Wooden, famous basketball coach, said, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. I'm going to paraphrase that just briefly and say, once something happens, it's often too late to prepare, meaning that your options often are more limited, right? For those who are proactive in planning, knowing that some things are obvious and some things are inevitable, such as the aging process and our ultimate mortality. We know that those things are going to happen. We just don't know exactly what's going to happen and exactly when or in what order. But we can do some things to prepare. So one of those things to prepare is thinking about someone, your person, whoever that person might be, who would normally sit beside you but is no longer there, hypothetically speaking. What happens? What happens if you are the person that would normally be sitting there and you're not there? How will the other person carry on in your absence? By being empathetic to the other person's experience and doing what we can to communicate with them about what we would like to see happen and what we would like to see happen for them, our values, our principles, what we would like to pass along other than money, our legacy. We can start to think about that. We can also do some pre-planning, communicating with people about our wishes once we're not here. Pre-planning can be a terrific stress relief for family members who would otherwise be burdened with final expenses and arrangements. Communicating with someone about whether you want to have a burial plot or cremation, for example, and to possibly even have a final expense policy to cover those costs as opposed to leave it for someone else to figure out once you're gone. And I'll say it's never just about the money, but it is always about the money. And so eventually, whatever's left over will go to someone, whether by design or by default. And your plan is better than the default plan. So if you don't have a plan, the state decides for you what that plan is. And I'll tell you that it's simple to just write out a will. You could fill out an online document and have it notarized in some cases. Other times you may want to see a professional and have a document. But have something communicated with other people so that they know what you want or don't want. Power of attorney, if you're unable to speak for yourself, have someone named to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. Communicate with others about what your wishes would be for things like food, hydration, ventilation, whether you do or don't want life-preserving measures. Those things can be a terrific burden on someone to try to guess what you might want or not want. Whereas if your living will or healthcare directive is available, then you're asking the individual just simply to honor your wishes. It's a much less of a burden. And I can say that from firsthand experience, watching my grandmother have a series of stroke and my mom and uncle having a surgeon ask them whether they want to authorize surgery or not. Fortunately, she had a living will. My grandmother had a living will. My uncle went and got it. They read it, and I could feel the stress lower when they realized that they're honoring her wishes. So while it's never about the money, it's always about the money. Communicate with people. Make sure your beneficiaries are exactly current and correct, how you want them. Have a conversation with people about things like basic financial literacy, things about values, what you would like to see your legacy and how you would like to be remembered so the family, once you're gone, can think of you and remember you in the way that you would wish. Thank you.